Ambassador stood at the observation window of the High Council chamber. Her pale blue skin had turned almost white from fear. Her 4 eyes could not look away from the sight before her. Through the reinforced glass, she watched her burn. The planet Prime had been beautiful once. Just 3 days ago, its silver oceans had sparkled under twin suns. Its floating cities had drifted peacefully through pink and purple clouds. 8 billion had gone about their lives without any idea of what was coming. Now fire rained from the sky. The OK Dominion had arrived without warning. Their massive warships had appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark monsters rising from deep water. Within hours, they had destroyed every defense station. Within a day, they had begun their bombardment. Pressed her thin fingers against the cold glass. Down on the surface, she could see the glow of burning cities. Each flash of light meant thousands of her people dying. Each explosion was a neighborhood, a school, a hospital turned to ash. "Ambassador," a voice called from behind her, "the council is ready." She did not turn around. How many dead? Her aide, a young male named, checked his data tablet with shaking hands. The estimates say 300 million so far. The southern continent has been hit the hardest. 300 million. The number was too large to understand, had lived for over 200 years. She had seen wars before. She had seen plagues and natural disasters, but nothing like this. Nothing so fast and so complete. The council repeated, "They are waiting." Finally turned away from the window. Her long robe swept across the polished floor as she walked toward the council chamber. The hallways of the government building were filled with running officials and crying civilians. Everyone was trying to reach the evacuation shuttles. Everyone was trying to escape. But there was nowhere to escape to. The OK ships controlled every exit point from the system. Any vessel that tried to run was destroyed within minutes. The council chamber was a large circular room with seats arranged in rising rows around a central platform. In normal times, 300 representatives would fill those seats to debate laws and make decisions. Today, only 12 figures sat in the shadows. The rest had either died in the attacks or fled to the underground shelters. First Minister stood at the center platform. He was old, even by standards. His skin had faded to a dull gray, and his bioluminescent patches barely glowed anymore. But his voice was still strong as he addressed the remaining council members. "We have contacted every ally in the Galactic Council," he said. "The responses have arrived." Took her seat among the other survivors. She already knew what the responses would say. She had spent 40 years as a diplomat. She understood how the galaxy worked. "The Federation expresses deep concern for our situation," continued, reading from a display screen. "They promise to raise the matter at the next council session in 6 months. They also note that sending military aid would violate their Treaty of Non-Aggression with the OK Dominion." A murmur of despair went through the chamber. "The Empire has not responded at all. Our messages to their government have gone unanswered for 2 days." "They are afraid," someone said from the upper seats. "The OK destroyed their border colonies last year. They will not risk another attack." Nodded sadly. "The consortium offers to accept refugees, but only those who can reach their territory on their own. They will not send ships into a war zone." "So they offer nothing," said. "They offer words," replied. "The Galactic Council has issued a formal condemnation of the OK attack. They have demanded an immediate cease of hostilities." And the OK response was quiet for a moment. Then he touched his display, and a harsh alien voice filled the chamber. The OK language was rough and ugly, full of clicking sounds and deep growls, but the translation appeared on every screen in the room. "The OK Dominion does not recognize the authority of the Galactic Council. The system now belongs to us by right of conquest. Any interference will be considered an act of war." The message ended. Silence filled the chamber. looked around at the faces of her fellow council members. She saw fear, she saw despair, she saw surrender in their eyes. They had accepted their fate, they had given up. She stood from her seat. There is one more option. Every eye turned to her. The Galactic Council has 73 member species, she continued. We have contacted 72 of them. There is one we have not asked for help. First Minister's bioluminescent patches flickered with alarm. Ambassador, surely you do not mean the Terran Alliance, humanity. The reaction was immediate. Several council members made sounds of shock. Others shook their heads violently. One elderly representative actually stood and walked out of the chamber without a word. That is impossible, said firmly. The humans are Category 12. You know what that means. Knew exactly what it meant. Every spacefaring species learned about planetary classifications from their first day in school. Worlds were rated from Category 1 to Category 15 based on how dangerous they were to intelligent life. Category 1 planets were paradises. Stable climates, no predators, abundant food. There was Category 3. Mild seasons, some dangerous wildlife, occasional natural disasters. Category 12 was something else entirely. Earth, the human, was a nightmare. Its climate shifted constantly between deadly extremes. Its oceans were filled with creatures that could swallow a whole. Its land was covered with predators that hunted in packs, poisonous plants that killed with a touch, and insects that carried diseases capable of destroying entire populations. The planet itself seemed designed to kill. Massive storms called hurricanes tore across its surface. The ground shook and split open without warning in events called earthquakes. Mountains exploded with liquid fire. The very air contained a corrosive gas called oxygen that slowly destroyed metal and organic matter alike. And somehow, impossibly, humans had evolved on this death world. They had not just survived, they had thrived. They had conquered every environment on their planet. They had hunted their predators to extinction. They had built cities that touched the sky and vessels that crossed the stars. In the 400 years since first contact, humanity had fought 7 wars against various galactic powers. They had won all 7, not through numbers or technology, but through sheer determination and a willingness to sacrifice that terrified every other species. They are dangerous, admitted, but they are also the only species in the galaxy that might actually help us. They are violent beyond reason, another council member argued. Their entire history is warfare. They fight each other as often as they fight outsiders. And yet they have never attacked a species that did not attack them first, replied. In 400 years, every war they have fought was in response to aggression against them or their allies. What allies? Demanded. No one allies with. The did. 20 years ago, when the OK threatened their outer colonies, they asked humanity for protection. The humans agreed. The OK backed down without firing a single shot. This caused some murmuring in the chamber. They were a small species, barely 50 billion across a handful of worlds. They had no military power, no political influence. Yet they had lived in peace for 20 years under human protection. The humans could have demanded anything from the, continued, resources, territory, political submission. Instead, they asked for nothing except a trade agreement and permission to build a small naval base. What is your point, Ambassador? Asked wearily. My point is that we have judged humanity by their capabilities without considering their actions. Yes, they are dangerous. Yes, they could destroy us if they wanted to. But they have never chosen to do so. Every species they have protected has remained free and independent. She stepped down to the central platform, standing next to the First Minister. We are dying. Our fleet is destroyed. Our cities are burning. In a few days, the OK will land their ground forces and begin the enslavement of whoever survives. We have tried every other option. We have begged every ally and received nothing but empty words. looked at each council member in turn. I am not asking you to trust the humans. I am asking you to give our people one last chance. What do we have to lose? The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly First Minister nodded. Send the message, all frequencies, priority 1. The communication was prepared within the hour, wrote it herself, choosing each word with care. She explained their situation clearly and simply. The OK attack, the failed requests for help, the millions already dead and the billions more who would die without intervention. She did not beg. Humans, she had learned from her diplomatic studies, did not respond well to begging. They responded to honesty and direct communication. The message ended with a single sentence: "We ask for your help." The signal launched into the void, traveling at faster-than-light speeds through the relay network that connected the galaxy. It would reach human space in approximately 4 hours. Returned to the observation window, the bombardment continued. Another city vanished in a flash of fire. She wondered if she had doomed her people or saved them. 13 light-years away, in the system, the message arrived at a Terran Alliance Navy communication station. The officer on duty was a young woman named Sarah. She had been watching the news reports about the situation with growing anger for days. Like most humans, she had wondered why no one was doing anything. Now, reading the distress call on her screen, she understood. No one had asked. "Sir," she called to her supervisor, "we have a priority 1 distress signal from the government. They're requesting military assistance against the OK Dominion." Her supervisor, a gray-haired commander named Williams, walked over to her station. He read the message twice, then reached for the secure communication line. "Get me Admiral Vance," he said. "Tell her it's urgent." Admiral Helena Vance was 57 years old. She had served in the Terran Alliance Navy for 35 years. She had fought in 3 wars, commanded 12 major operations, and earned every medal the Navy could give. But she had never received a message like this. She sat in her office aboard the carrier TSS Indomitable, reading the distress call for the 5th time. Her coffee had gone cold. Her dinner sat untouched on her desk. "They're asking us for help," she said quietly. Her executive officer, Captain, stood at attention nearby. "Yes, ma'am. First time a non-allied species has made a formal request for military intervention. The Galactic Council is going to lose their minds." "Probably, ma'am." Vance smiled slightly. She didn't care about the Galactic Council. She didn't care about politics or diplomatic complications. She cared about one thing: people were dying, and someone had finally asked her to do something about it. She stood from her desk and straightened her uniform. "How many ships do we have in the sector?" "The 3rd Fleet is currently at full strength, Admiral. 312 combat vessels plus support ships." "That's a good start." She walked to her window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that direction, a civilization was being destroyed. "Contact Admiral Torres of the 4th Fleet, Admiral of the 7th, Admiral of the 9th. Tell them we have a situation and I need everyone who can reach the system within 72 hours. Raised his eyebrows. "You're mobilizing 4 fleets for a species we have no treaty with." "I'm mobilizing anyone who wants to come." Vance turned to face him. "Send the word out on open channels too. Any civilian vessel that wants to help with evacuation and relief efforts is welcome to join the convoy. Any reserve unit that wants to volunteer can report to the nearest rally point." "Admiral, the Senate will have questions about this." "Then they can ask them, after we save 8 billion people from extinction." She picked up her cap and placed it on her head. "Set course for the system, maximum speed." "Ma'am, the OK have over 800 warships in that system, even with 4 fleets." Captain Vance's voice was calm but firm. "Someone asked for our help. We're going. That's all there is to it." Had served under Admiral Vance for 6 years. He had learned not to argue when she used that tone. Yes, ma'am. I'll give the orders. Within an hour, the TSS Indomitable and its escort fleet had changed course. Within 3 hours, the word had spread across human space. Within 6 hours, volunteer ships were launching from colonies and stations throughout the Terran Alliance. The Galactic Council received notification of the human mobilization and immediately sent a message urging caution and restraint. The Terran Alliance Senate demanded an explanation from the Navy. The OK Dominion issued a warning that any interference in the system would be considered an act of war. Admiral Vance responded to none of these messages. She had received a distress call. She had her orders. Everything else was noise. On Prime, Ambassador waited. The bombardment continued. More cities fell. More millions died. She did not know if the humans had received her message. She did not know if they would respond. She only knew that she had done everything she could. In the council chamber, First Minister approached her with a data tablet. Ambassador, our monitoring stations have detected something unusual. What is it? A massive energy signature at the edge of the system. It matches the profile of multiple vessels entering faster-than-light travel. He showed her the readings. They are headed this way. Felt her heart stop. How many ships? Unknown, but the energy readings are significant. She looked at the tablet, then at the observation window, then back at the tablet. When will they arrive? Approximately 47 hours. 47 hours. In 47 hours, either their saviors would arrive or their executioners would add more ships to the OK fleet. Had gambled everything on the nature of a species she had never met, a species everyone else in the galaxy feared, a species born on a death world, hardened by constant danger, driven by instincts that other beings could barely understand. She had sent a cry for help into the darkness. Now she could only wait to see who would answer. Overlord stood on the command deck of his flagship, the OK vessel Endless Conquest. He was tall even by OK standards, nearly 3 meters of scaled muscle and armored bone. His yellow eyes watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. There was breaking. His bombardment had been running for 5 days now. 60% of their major cities were destroyed. Their military had been crushed in the first hours of the invasion. Their government was hiding underground like frightened insects. Status report, he commanded. His tactical officer, a veteran named, checked his console. Southern Hemisphere is fully. Ground forces have begun landing to secure resources and prisoners. Northern Hemisphere still has some resistance, but it is minimal. Total enemy casualties estimated at 400 million. 400 million. A good number. The OK Dominion had conquered 47 worlds in the past 100 years. There were simply the 48th. Their pretty cities and advanced technology would serve the Dominion well. Their survivors would work in the mines and factories until they died. This was the way of things. The strong conquered, the weak served. It had always been so. Any response from the Galactic Council? Asked. More condemnations, more demands for a ceasefire, made a sound of contempt. They talk while we act, as always. Allowed himself a thin smile. The Galactic Council was a joke. 73 species supposedly united for peace and cooperation. In reality, they were 73 groups of cowards, each too afraid to act without the others. By the time they finished debating whether to respond, the civilization would be a memory. Continue the bombardment. I want the Northern Hemisphere broken within 2 days. Then we begin full ground occupation. Yes, Overlord. Turned from the tactical display and walked toward his private chambers. He would rest for a few hours, then return to watch the final destruction. Perhaps he would choose a few artifacts for his personal collection. Their artwork was quite beautiful, or so he had heard. He never reached his chambers. Overlord's voice was sharp with alarm. We have contacts. Spun around and strode back to the command deck. Where? System Edge, Sector 7. Clawed fingers flew across his console, multiple spatial distortions, ships exiting faster than light travel. The Galactic Council finally found their courage. No, Overlord, the energy signatures do not match Council vessels, went pale under his scales. They match Terran Alliance design patterns. Felt something cold move through his chest. It was not fear. Okay, commanders did not feel fear, but it was something close to it. Caution, perhaps concern. Humans here. It appears so, Overlord. They are transmitting a message on all frequencies. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled, and a female voice filled the air. She spoke Galactic Common with an accent had never heard before. Human accent. The sounds were harsh and direct, lacking the musical quality of most civilized languages. This is Admiral Helena Vance of the Terran Alliance Navy. You are engaged in hostile action against a species that has requested our protection. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw from this system. There will be no second warning. The message ended. Silence fell over the command deck. Stared at the tactical display. The human ships were appearing one by one, each marker representing a vessel exiting faster than light. He counted them as they appeared. 50, 100, 200. How many ships do we have? He asked. 823 combat vessels, Overlord, plus support craft. The human fleet stopped growing at 312 ships, felt his confidence return. The humans were outnumbered almost 3 to 1. Whatever reputation they had, whatever stories were told about them, numbers mattered in warfare. Superior numbers won battles. Respond to their message, he ordered. Tell them that the OK Dominion does not recognize human authority in this sector. The system is ours by right of conquest. Any interference will be considered an act of war against the Dominion. The message was sent. The response came within minutes. Acknowledged. Consider this your notice that the Terran Alliance is now at war with the OK Dominion. You have 53 minutes remaining to withdraw. Laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that echoed through the command deck. His officers laughed with him, though some of them seemed uncertain. They threaten us with 300 ships against 800. He shook his head in disbelief. The humans are either brave or stupid, perhaps both. Your orders, Overlord. Ignore them. Continue the bombardment. Detail the 3rd and 4th attack groups to intercept the human fleet. 300 ships should be sufficient to teach them respect. The orders went out. 300 OK warships broke from the formation and moved to intercept the approaching humans. Watched them go with satisfaction. This would be a valuable lesson for the entire galaxy. Even the feared could be defeated when they were outnumbered. He was still thinking about the victory celebration when the human fleet attacked. Admiral Helena Vance had spent decades studying war. She had read the histories of every conflict humanity had ever fought, from ancient battles with swords and spears to modern engagements with plasma weapons and kinetic missiles. She had also studied every known engagement involving the OK Dominion. The OK were not subtle. They relied on superior numbers and overwhelming firepower. They formed their fleets into dense formations and advanced in straight lines, trusting their shields and armor to absorb enemy fire until they reached optimal weapon range. It was an effective strategy against the timid species of the Galactic Council. Against humans, it was suicide. All ships execute attack pattern Delta 7, Vance ordered. Target their formation center. I want them split in half before they know what hit them. The 3rd Fleet surged forward. Unlike OK vessels, human ships were built for speed and maneuverability. They could accelerate at rates that would crush any other species. Human bodies, evolved on a heavy-gravity death world, could survive forces that would liquefy a OK crew. The 2 fleets met in a storm of fire and metal. The OK had expected a careful exchange of weapons at long range. Instead, The human ships dove directly into their formation at impossible speeds. They fired as they came, their weapons tearing through shields that had been designed to resist attacks from greater distances. "They are insane," shouted from his console. "They are flying directly into our guns." This was true. Human ships took hit after hit as they charged. Their shields flared and failed. Their hulls were torn open, but they did not slow down, they did not retreat. And they did not stop firing. The first OK cruiser exploded 6 minutes into the engagement, then another, then 3 more in quick succession. The human ships were cutting through the formation like knives through soft flesh. Captain stood on the bridge of the destroyer TSS Resilient. His ship had taken 14 hits so far. Half his crew was wounded. 3 compartments were venting atmosphere into space. But his weapons were still firing and his engines were still burning. "Target that dreadnought," he ordered, pointing at a massive OK vessel on his display. "All batteries concentrate fire." "Sir, our shields are gone," his weapons officer reported. "We're taking direct hits." "I know, fire anyway." The Resilient's guns blazed. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds slammed into the OK dreadnought, tearing through its armored hull. The enemy ship returned fire, and the Resilient shuddered as another hit struck home. "Hull breach on deck 4. Keep firing." The dreadnought's reactor failed. The massive ship broke apart in a silent explosion of fire and debris. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer reported. His voice was shaking, but he was smiling. "Moving to next target." Allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then his ship took another hit, and alarms started screaming throughout the bridge. "Engineering reports critical damage to main engines." "Can we still fight?" "Yes, sir. Weapons are operational." "Then find me another target." This was the human way of war. They did not care about losses. They did not calculate acceptable casualties. They fought until they won or until they were dead. There was no middle ground, no surrender, no retreat. Overlord watched his 300 ships being torn apart with growing horror. The humans had lost perhaps 40 vessels. He had lost over 150, and the battle had been going on for less than 30 minutes. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We outnumber them." "Their ships are faster than our tactical projections suggested," reported. His voice had lost its usual confidence. "And their crews are surviving acceleration rates that should be fatal. They are pushing their vessels beyond design limits." "Beyond limits, they will destroy their own ships." "Yes, Overlord, but they are destroying ours first." Stared at the tactical display. The battle was becoming a massacre. His ships were designed for methodical combat, for grinding down enemies through superior numbers. They were not designed to fight an enemy that charged directly into their guns without fear. "Recall the 3rd and 4th attack groups," he ordered. "Full retreat back to the main fleet." "Overlord, if we retreat." "I said recall them. We need to consolidate our forces." The surviving OK ships began pulling back, but the humans did not let them go easily. They pursued, firing constantly, picking off stragglers. By the time the attack groups reached the safety of the main fleet, they had lost another 60 vessels. 300 ships had engaged the human fleet. 112 returned. Admiral Vance watched the enemy retreat with grim satisfaction. The first phase of the battle was complete. Now came the hard part. "Status report," she ordered. "We lost 47 ships in the engagement, Admiral. Another 32 are damaged but combat capable. All surviving crews have been recovered." Vance nodded. 47 ships. Each one represented hundreds of human lives. She felt every loss like a weight on her shoulders, but she could not stop. Not now. Not when billions of civilians were still dying on the planet below. "How long until the 4th Fleet arrives?" "Approximately 16 hours, Admiral." "And the 7th and 9th?" 20 hours and 23 hours respectively. 16 hours. She had to hold the line for 16 hours with a damaged fleet against an enemy that still outnumbered her by more than 2 to 1. Move us into a defensive position near the planet. We're not letting them continue the bombardment. On the surface of Prime, Ambassador stood in the underground command center with tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 5 days, the bombardment had stopped. The OK ships had pulled back to regroup, and the human fleet had taken position between them and the planet. "They came," she whispered. "They actually came." First Minister stood beside her, watching the tactical display with wonder. 300 ships against 800, and they attacked without hesitation. Who are these beings? Thought about everything she had learned about humanity. Their violent history, their endless wars, their classification as, all of it had made them seem like monsters, like something to be feared and avoided. But now she understood something that the rest of the galaxy had missed. The same traits that made humans dangerous also made them unstoppable when they chose to fight for something. They did not calculate odds. They did not weigh costs. They simply refused to give up. "They are exactly what we needed," she said. "God's help the OK." Overlord stared at the tactical display aboard the Endless Conquest. His confident smile was gone. His officers were silent, their earlier laughter forgotten. The humans had stopped his bombardment. They had crippled a third of his intercepting force, and they showed no sign of backing down. "What are your orders, Overlord?" asked quietly. Did not answer immediately. He was thinking about something his tutors had told him long ago when he was young and learning the art of war. They had told him about the humans. They had warned him never to give them a reason to fight. "They are," his old teacher had said. "They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Fighting is not something they do, it is something they are. If you force them to battle, they will not stop until you are destroyed or they are dead. There is no reasoning with them, no negotiating, no surrender they will accept. They are the galaxy's apex predator, and they have no off switch." Had dismissed these warnings as exaggeration. Surely no species could be that dangerous. Surely numbers and strategy would overcome any enemy. Now, watching the human fleet hold position between his forces and their prize, he was beginning to understand. Overlord prompted again. "We wait," said finally. "We still outnumber them. We will wear them down through attrition, keep our distance and harry them with long-range fire. No more direct engagements." And the bombardment. Looked at the planet on his display. So close, so valuable, and now guarded by 300 human ships that would rather die than retreat. Suspended for now, he turned and walked toward his chambers. "Inform me if anything changes." Admiral Vance received reports of the enemy's new strategy within hours. Long-range missile attacks, probing strikes against her flanks. The OK were trying to bleed her fleet dry without committing to another direct engagement. It was a smart move. In 16 hours it might have worked. But in 16 hours the 4th Fleet would arrive, and then the 7th, and then the 9th. The word had spread across human space. A distress call had been answered. A civilization was being saved. Volunteers were flooding in from every colony and station. Ships that had been in for repairs were launching with half their systems offline. Reserve units were mobilizing without orders. Civilian transports were loading relief supplies and heading for the system. The OK had made a terrible mistake. They had not just threatened a planet. They had given humanity something to fight for. And humanity, when given something to fight for, was the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Vance stood at her observation window, watching her fleet repel another probing attack. Her ships were battered. Her crews were exhausted, but they were holding. 16 hours, she said quietly. "Just hold for 16 more hours." Behind her, the planet Prime hung in space. Its surface was and burning, but the bombardment had stopped. Millions who would have died in the next 16 hours would now live. It was not victory, not yet, but it was a start. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, more human ships were coming. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They had received a distress call. They had answered. And they were just getting started. Commander had served in the Defense Force for 60 years. He had trained for war his entire adult life, studying tactics and strategy, running simulations, preparing for the day when his people might need to fight. He had always believed he understood combat. Now, watching the humans fight, he realized he understood nothing. The underground command center had become the last functioning military installation on Prime. Deep beneath the surface, protected by hundreds of meters of rock and reinforced shielding, and his surviving staff monitored the battle in orbit. They could do nothing to help. Their fleet was destroyed, their weapons platforms were gone, and their surface defenses had been wiped out in the first hours of the invasion. All they could do was watch. "They are insane," said for perhaps the 20th time. He stared at the tactical display, watching a human destroyer engage 3 OK cruisers simultaneously. The destroyer's shields had failed long ago. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places. By any reasonable standard, it should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, it was still firing. "Sir," one of his officers called out. "The human vessel Resilient has just destroyed its second target. It is moving to engage the third cruiser despite critical damage to its primary systems." "How is that possible? Their ship is barely holding together." "They appear to have rerouted all remaining power to weapons and engines. Life support is at minimum levels. Artificial gravity has been disabled." The officer paused, checking his readings again. "They are operating in conditions that would kill a crew within minutes." Shook his head slowly. The humans had been fighting for 18 hours without rest. Their ships were battered and damaged. They had lost over 60 vessels since the battle began, and yet they showed no sign of slowing down, no sign of doubt, no sign of the fear that any reasonable species would feel in their situation. A new contact appeared on the edge of his display, then another, then dozens more. "Commander, new vessels arriving at the system edge." Felt his stomach clench with fear. More OK reinforcements. If the enemy received more ships, the human defense would collapse. Everything they had sacrificed would be for nothing. Then the identification signals came through, and felt something he had not felt in days: hope. "Terran Alliance 4th Fleet has arrived," his officer reported, his voice rising with excitement. 287 additional combat vessels. They are moving to support the 3rd Fleet. The humans had kept their promise. Reinforcements had come. But the tactical situation was still desperate. Even with the 4th Fleet, the humans were outnumbered. The OK still had over 600 ships, and more could be coming from their territory at any moment. "Sir, there is a human officer requesting to speak with you." Turned from the display. "What?" "A lieutenant commander. He says he has been assigned as liaison to the Defense Force. He is outside the command center now." A human here on the surface. Hesitated. Everything he had been taught about screamed at him to be cautious. These beings came from a world of constant danger. They were stronger, faster, and more resilient than almost any other species. In close quarters, a single human could probably kill everyone in this room. But they had also come to save his people. They had fought and died for strangers they had never met. Surely he could at least speak with one of them. "Let him in," ordered. The door opened, and stepped into the command center. He was shorter than had expected, perhaps 1.8 meters tall. His skin was a light brown color, and his black hair was cut short in military fashion. He wore a gray uniform that was stained with blood and burn marks. His left arm was wrapped in a bandage that had turned red with seeping wounds. He was injured. He had come down to the surface while wounded. "Commander?" asked. His voice was calm and professional, as if he was not standing in an alien bunker with bleeding wounds. Lieutenant Commander, Terran Alliance Navy. I've been assigned to coordinate ground operations and civilian evacuation. Found his voice with difficulty. You are injured. Nothing serious. Caught some shrapnel when my ship took a hit. Glanced at his bandaged arm as if he had forgotten about it. The Resilient is being repaired in orbit. Admiral Vance thought I could be more useful down here while we wait for parts. Your ship was the one engaging 3 cruisers. Yes, sir. We got 2 of them before our weapons gave out. The 3rd one ran when the 4th Fleet arrived. Smiled slightly. Good timing on their part. Stared at the human. He had just fought for 18 hours in a damaged ship, been wounded by enemy fire, and now he was standing here discussing coordination as if nothing had happened. How? Asked. The question came out before he could stop it. How do you do this? How do you keep fighting when any reasonable being would surrender? Was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about the question seriously, not offended by it. I guess we don't really have a choice, he said finally. I mean, we do have a choice technically. We could retreat, we could surrender, but it never feels like a real option. He gestured at the tactical display showing the battle in orbit. Those people up there, the ones still fighting, they're not doing it because they were ordered to. They're doing it because someone asked for help. And when someone asks us for help, we help. It's just how we're built. Built by your world, said quietly. Your death world. Yeah, Earth is. It's a hard place. Everything there is trying to kill you all the time. Whether animals, disease, even the planet itself. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. Shrugged. You either learn to fight back or you die. And after millions of years of that, fighting back became the only response we know. But you do not fight for yourselves. You fight for us, for strangers. That's the thing about learning to fight for survival. You can't do it alone. Humans are social creatures. We survive by protecting each other. Our families, our friends, our neighbors. And once you've learned to protect your own people, it's not such a big step to protect other people too. Looked at with an expression that seemed almost sad. Everyone in the galaxy thinks we're monsters because we're dangerous, but being dangerous doesn't make you evil. It just makes you effective when you choose to protect someone. Thought about this for a long moment. He had spent his entire life fearing, believing the warnings about their violent nature and unpredictable behavior. Now, standing face to face with one, he was beginning to understand how wrong those warnings had been. The humans were not monsters. They were exactly what their world had made them: survivors, fighters, protectors. They had simply directed those instincts toward helping others instead of harming them. I am grateful, said. My people are grateful. You have saved millions of lives already. We're not done yet, replied. The OK still have a lot of ships and more might be coming, but we're not going anywhere until this is finished. He smiled again, and there was something fierce in his eyes that made shiver. They made a mistake when they attacked your people. They gave us a reason to fight, and humans don't stop fighting until we win. In orbit, the battle continued. Admiral Vance had integrated the 4th Fleet into her defensive formation. 600 human ships now stood between the OK and the planet. The enemy still had the advantage in numbers, but that advantage was shrinking. Admiral, incoming message from the OK flagship. Vance raised an eyebrow. They want to talk, put it through. The flickered and the image of Overlord appeared. His yellow eyes blazed with barely controlled fury. His scales were dark with stress, and his voice was rough and angry. Human Commander, I am Overlord of the OK Dominion. You have interfered in matters that do not concern you. The system belongs to us by right of conquest. The system belongs to the, Vance replied calmly. They asked for our help, we gave it. You have no treaty with them, no alliance, no strategic interest in their survival. We have a distress call, that's enough. Leaned forward, his massive form filling the. You cannot win this battle. Even with your reinforcements, you are outnumbered. Our ships will grind your fleet to dust. Your people will die for nothing." Vance smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Overlord, you seem to be under the impression that we care about the odds. Let me explain something about humanity. We don't calculate the probability of victory before we fight. We don't weigh the potential losses against the potential gains. When someone asks us for help, we help. And we keep helping until the job is done." "Madness? You speak of madness." "Maybe, but our madness has won every war we've ever fought. Can you say the same?" Was silent. The answer, of course, was no. The OK had lost wars before. They had been driven back from systems, defeated by superior enemies, forced to accept unfavorable terms. They understood the mathematics of defeat. The humans apparently did not. "You will regret this," said finally. "When your fleet is destroyed and your people are dead, you will regret challenging the Dominion." "I'll take that risk." Vance leaned back in her command chair. "Now I have a battle to fight. You can either withdraw and save what's left of your fleet, or you can stay and watch it burn. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. Vance turned to her tactical officer. "Status on the 7th and 9th Fleets." 3 hours and 6 hours respectively, Admiral. We've also received word that additional volunteer forces are en route. Current estimates put total reinforcements at over 1,000 additional vessels within the next 12 hours. 1,000. Vance allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. It seems the word got out. "Yes, Admiral, the entire alliance is mobilizing. Every colony, every station, every outpost that has ships available is sending them." The officer paused, his voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen anything like it. Reserve units are launching without orders. Civilian transports are loading supplies and heading our way. Even some private vessels are joining the convoy." This was the power of humanity that other species never understood. They saw humans as dangerous individuals, evolved predators from a death world. What they failed to see was that humans were also a social species, bound together by invisible ties of loyalty and shared purpose. When one human was threatened, others came to help. When a cause was declared worthy, thousands volunteered without being asked. And when a distress call went out, the entire species responded as if it had been their own family in danger. The OK had attacked a civilization on the other side of the galaxy. They had made it humanity's problem. That was their greatest mistake. On the surface of Prime, the evacuation was beginning. Human shuttles were landing at every intact spaceport, loading civilians and carrying them to safety aboard the orbiting fleet. Medical teams were treating the wounded. Engineers were working to restore power and water to damaged shelters. Lieutenant Commander walked through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful floating city. The anti-gravity systems had failed during the bombardment, and the entire structure had crashed to the ground. Thousands had died in the impact. Thousands more were still trapped in the wreckage. Human soldiers worked alongside survivors, digging through rubble, pulling out the injured, recovering the dead. They had been at it for hours without rest. Approached a young private who was carefully moving debris away from a collapsed building. The soldier was covered in dust and grime, and his hands were bleeding from sharp metal edges. "Private, when was the last time you slept?" The soldier looked up, startled. "Sir, I don't know, sir. Before we arrived in the system, I think." "That was almost 30 hours ago." "Yes, sir, but there are still people trapped." The private gestured at the rubble around him. "I can hear them sometimes, calling for help. I can't stop while they're still in there." Looked at the young man for a long moment. He was barely 20 years old, probably fresh out of basic training. He had never seen combat before this week, never watched people die, never faced the horror of war. And yet here he was, digging through alien rubble with his bare hands because somewhere underneath, someone was still alive. "Carry on, Private, but get some water and food when you can. We need you standing." "Yes, sir." Continued through the rescue site. Everywhere he looked, he saw the same scene: exhausted humans pushing past their limits to help strangers. It was nothing special to them. It was simply what they did. He thought about what he had told Commander, about how humans were built to protect each other, about how that instinct extended to anyone who asked for help. It was true, but it was also incomplete. The full truth was something he could not easily explain to an alien. Humans were not just protective. They were stubborn. Once they had committed to a cause, they would not stop until they achieved it or died trying. It was a trait that had led to terrible things throughout human history: wars that dragged on for decades, conflicts that destroyed civilizations, grudges that lasted for generations. But it could also lead to moments like this. Moments when the entire species united behind a single purpose. Moments when the stubbornness and aggression that made humans dangerous became the very qualities that made them heroes. The OK had picked a fight with the galaxy's most persistent species. They were about to learn what that meant. In orbit, alarms began sounding aboard the OK flagship. Overlord, more contacts at the system edge. Rush to the command deck, more humans. Yes, Overlord. The energy signatures matched Terran Alliance vessels. His voice was strained with something that sounded like fear. Approximately 300 ships. They are identifying themselves as the 7th Fleet. 300 more. Added to the 600 already present, that meant 900 human ships were now in the system. For the first time since the battle began, the OK were outnumbered. But that was not what makes blood run cold. Overlord, we are intercepting human communications. They are discussing additional forces. What additional forces? A fleet designated the 9th is approximately 3 hours away. They have also mentioned volunteer squadrons, hundreds of them, coming from across their territory. Stared at the display. The human markers were spreading across the tactical map like a growing disease. More and more ships were appearing, streaming in from the edge of the system. How many ships do they have? He demanded. In total. Checked his intelligence files. His face went pale. Overlord, our estimates of Terran Alliance military strength suggest they maintain a standing navy of approximately 8,000 combat vessels. 8,000. Yes, Overlord. And that does not include reserve forces, auxiliary ships, or civilian vessels that could be converted for military use. Swallowed hard. They are saying that these fleets were just the closest available forces. They left 6,000 ships behind to guard their home systems. 6,000 as a reserve for one sector. Finally understood. He had not just attacked a neutral species. He had kicked a sleeping giant, and the giant was now fully awake. The humans had not sent their military to save the. They had sent whatever was nearby. And they were still coming. The 9th Fleet arrived 3 hours after the 7th. 294 additional warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately moved to reinforce the human formation. Admiral Vance now commanded nearly 1,200 combat vessels, with more arriving every hour. But the reinforcements did not stop there. Volunteer squadrons began appearing at the system edge in waves. Reserve units from a dozen different colonies. Private security ships owned by mining corporations and transport companies. Even some luxury yachts that had been hastily fitted with weapons and piloted by civilians who wanted to help. Captain Sarah of the converted freighter Hope's Light was one of these volunteers. Her ship was a cargo hauler, designed to carry supplies between colonies in the outer systems. It had no military-grade weapons, no armor plating, no training for combat. It had arrived anyway. "This is Hope's Light to any Terran vessel," she broadcast as her ship entered the system. "We're carrying medical supplies and emergency rations. Where do you need us?" The response came within seconds. "Hope's Light, this is Fleet Command. We're directing you to coordinate with the relief convoy at Rally Point 7. They're evacuating civilians from the northern continent. Welcome to the fight. Thank you, Command. Hope's Light moving to Rally Point 7. Sarah had never served in the military. She was a freight captain, a businesswoman who had spent 20 years hauling cargo across the trade routes. But when she had heard about the distress call, when she had learned that people were dying while the rest of the galaxy did nothing, she had made her choice. She had loaded every medical supply she could find, gathered a crew of volunteers, and set course for the combat zone. Her husband had told her she was crazy. Her crew had agreed but had come anyway. Now, watching the massive battle unfolding in orbit, Sarah wondered if they had been right. But she also knew she could not have stayed home, not when someone needed help. Across the system, similar scenes were playing out. A retired admiral had pulled his old patrol ship out of storage and convinced 100 veterans to crew it. A group of college students had pooled their money to rent a shuttle and filled it with food and medicine. A famous musician had announced a benefit concert on live broadcast and then flown to the combat zone to deliver the proceeds personally. The entire human race was responding to the distress call, not because they had been ordered to, not because they would gain anything from it, but because someone had asked for help and humans did not ignore requests for help. Overlord watched the human reinforcements arriving with growing despair. His tactical advantage had evaporated. His 800 ships were now outnumbered, and the gap was widening with every passing hour. Overlord said quietly, "We must consider withdrawal." Withdrawal spun to face his subordinate. "You suggest we flee, abandon our conquest." "I suggest we survive," gestured at the tactical display. "The humans now outnumber us. More are coming. If we continue this battle, we will be destroyed. The OK Dominion does not flee from combat. The OK Dominion has never faced an enemy like this," stepped closer to his commander, lowering his voice. "Overlord, I have served you for 30 years. I have followed you through 47 conquests, but this is different. These humans, they do not fight like other species. They do not care about losses or odds or strategic advantage. They simply keep coming, and they will not stop until we are dead." Stared at his old friend and second-in-command. He wanted to argue, to insist that they could still win, that OK courage and strength would overcome any enemy, but he could see the truth in the numbers. His fleet was being steadily surrounded. His escape routes were being cut off one by one. And still the human ships kept arriving. "If we run," said slowly, "the Dominion will consider it a disgrace. I will be stripped of my rank, my titles, my honor. If we stay, there will be no one left to strip anything from." Was silent for a long moment. Then he made his decision. "Signal the fleet, we will." "Overlord, new contacts." Both officers turned to the tactical display. More ships were appearing at the system edge, but these did not match human energy signatures. "Identification," demanded. Checked his console and his face went pale. "Defense Force, approximately 60 ships." The small species that had allied with humanity 20 years ago. They had come to fight alongside their protectors. But they were not alone. "More contacts, consortium vessels, 212 ships." His voice was rising with each announcement. "Federation, 193 ships. Empire, 347 ships." Stared at the display in disbelief. The species that had refused to help though were now arriving in force. The same governments that had sent empty words and meaningless condemnations were now sending warships. "Why?" he whispered. "They refused to intervene. They said they would not risk war with the Dominion." Admiral Vance received the same sensor readings aboard the Indomitable. She was just as surprised as, though for different reasons. "Multiple non-human fleets arriving," her tactical officer reported. "They're identifying themselves as allies of the people." "Allies that don't have allies, that's why they called us." "I'm getting communication requests from everyone, Admiral. The Federation, the Empire, the Consortium. They're all asking to join our formation. Vance frowned. These were the same species that had turned their backs on the same governments that had sent thoughts and prayers instead of help. Now they wanted to fight. Put me through to the lead vessel. The Shoda Admiral, a tall creature with silver skin and large dark eyes. She looked uncomfortable, almost ashamed. Admiral Vance, the said, we are here to offer our assistance. Your assistance? You told that you couldn't help. You cited your treaty with the OK. Yes, we were cautious. The Admiral lowered her eyes. When we heard that you had responded to the distress call, we were surprised. We did not believe anyone would actually come. And when we saw your fleet fighting, when we watched you sacrifice your ships and your people to protect strangers, we felt ashamed. Ashamed? We have always feared the OK. They are powerful and cruel, and we believed that confronting them would only bring suffering to our own people. So we did nothing. We let them die while we hid behind our treaties and our excuses. The Admiral finally met Vance's eyes. But you showed us something different. You showed us that it is possible to stand up to evil without calculating the cost. You showed us that courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. Vance was quiet for a moment. She had expected many things from this mission, but she had not expected this. The Galactic Council has always criticized humanity for being too violent, too aggressive, she said. Now you want to fight alongside us. We want to do what we should have done from the beginning. The Admiral straightened her posture. Our ships are at your disposal, Admiral. Tell us where to fight. One by one, the other arriving fleets made similar offers. The Empire admitted that they had been cowards. The Consortium apologized for their earlier refusal. Even the small contingent who had come to support their human allies offered to fight alongside the main fleet. Within hours, Admiral Vance found herself commanding not just a human fleet but an allied armada. Over 2,000 ships from a dozen different species now faced the OK Dominion. On the surface of Prime, Ambassador received the news with tears in her eyes. They came, she said to First Minister, all of them, the whole galaxy came. Because of the humans, replied, they shamed the others into action. Nodded slowly. She understood now what had happened. The humans had not just answered a distress call, they had changed the galaxy. For centuries, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through caution and compromise. Species avoided conflict by staying out of each other's affairs. When someone was attacked, others offered sympathy but not assistance. It was safer that way. It was more rational. But the humans had rejected that rationality. They had rushed into danger to help strangers, sacrificed their ships and their lives for people they had never met. And in doing so, they had forced everyone else to confront a simple question. What kind of species do we want to be? The answer, apparently, was not the kind that stood by while innocents died. Overlord made his final decision aboard the burning deck of the Endless Conquest. The battle had turned against him completely. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by the combined forces of humanity and their new allies. More than half his ships were already gone. The remainder were fighting a desperate retreat toward the system's edge. Signal the remaining vessels, he ordered. Full withdrawal, all ships to fall back to Dominion space. Nodded grimly, yes, Overlord. The retreat was chaos. Human ships pursued the fleeing OK, picking off stragglers, destroying transports, intercepting escape pods. For every ship that made it to the jump point, 2 were destroyed. Watched the slaughter from his command deck. His magnificent fleet, the pride of the Dominion, was being torn apart around him. Overlord, we are being targeted by multiple human vessels. Evasive maneuvers. Sir, our engines are damaged. We cannot. The impact threw across the deck. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Fire erupted from damaged systems. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red illumination. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. We have lost main power. Life support failing. Pulled himself to his feet. His ship was dying around him, but he refused to fall. He was an overlord of the OK Dominion. He would face death standing. Another impact rocked the vessel. Through the cracked viewport could see a human destroyer closing in for the final kill. Its weapons were charging, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Then suddenly, the destroyer stopped firing. "Overlord, we are receiving a communication from the human ship." "Put it through." A human face appeared on the flickering screen. Male, middle-aged, with hard eyes and a grim expression. "This is Captain of the TSS Resilient. Your ship is disabled and no longer a threat. If you surrender, we will rescue your crew and treat them according to interstellar law. If you continue to resist, we will destroy you. The choice is yours." Stared at the human captain. The Resilient. He remembered that ship from the intelligence reports. It had been crippled in the early fighting, its captain wounded, its hull torn open in a dozen places. Yet here it was, still fighting, offering mercy to an enemy that would never have done the same. "Why?" asked. His voice was weak, damaged by smoke and exhaustion. "Why offer quarter? Your people died because of me. Your ship's burned. You should want revenge." Was quiet for a moment. "I do want revenge, Overlord. Every human in this system wants revenge, but revenge isn't justice, and we didn't come here for revenge." He leaned forward, his eyes hard but not cruel. "We came because someone asked for help. The fighting is over. Your fleet is beaten. There's no reason for anyone else to die today." Looked around at his shattered command deck, at the wounded officers struggling to survive, at the bodies of those who had already died. He had lost, completely and utterly. The conquest of the system had become the worst defeat in OK history. His career was over. His honor was destroyed. But his people did not need to die with him. "We surrender," said quietly. "I surrender, save my crew." Nodded. "Rescue teams are on their way. Tell your people to stand down and prepare for evacuation." The transmission ended. Slumped against a damaged console, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. He had come to this system as a conqueror. He was leaving it as a prisoner. And the being who had defeated him, the who had destroyed everything he had built, had offered him mercy instead of death. Perhaps, thought, the galaxy had been wrong about humans all along. Perhaps the real monsters were those who stood by while innocents suffered. Perhaps they, for all their violence and aggression, were something better. Perhaps they were exactly what the galaxy needed. The battle of the system was over. Of the 823 OK warships that had invaded, only 17 escaped to friendly space. The rest were destroyed or captured. Human losses were significant but not devastating. 112 ships destroyed, another 200 damaged. 4,600 humans died in the fighting. Each one was remembered, each one was mourned. But the mission was a success. The civilization had been saved. 8 billion people who would have been enslaved or killed were now free, and the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Admiral Vance stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching the combined fleet patrol the liberated system. Human ships flew alongside cruisers and destroyers. Transports carried supplies to the surface. Medical ships treated the wounded of every species. It was, she thought, a beautiful sight. Her aide approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Governments, media organizations, private citizens, everyone wants to know the same thing." "What's that?" Why did we come? Why did we fight for strangers? Why did we risk everything for people we had never met?" Vance considered the question. It was a fair one. By any rational calculation, the intervention made no sense. Humanity had gained nothing from saving them. No territory, no resources, no strategic advantage. They had spent lives and ships for a people who could never repay them. And yet to a human, the question was absurd. Because they asked, Vance said simply. What other reason do we need? Her aide smiled. I'll tell them, Admiral. On the surface of Prime, the reconstruction was beginning. Human engineers were working to restore power and water systems. Human doctors were treating the injured. Human soldiers were clearing rubble and searching for survivors. They would be there for months, perhaps years. The damage was extensive, and the road to recovery would be long. But the people would not walk that road alone. Ambassador stood among the ruins of her capital city, watching a human shuttle land in what had once been a public park. Supplies were unloaded. Medical teams rushed to help the wounded. Children who had lost everything were given food and blankets and comfort. She had feared the all her life. Everyone had. Now, watching them work, she understood how wrong that fear had been. The humans were not monsters. They were guardians. They were protectors. They were the galaxy's best hope for a future where the strong defended the weak instead of exploiting them. And they had answered her call. 3 weeks had passed since the battle. The OK fleet was gone, either destroyed or retreating back to their home territory. The combined Allied forces had established a protective perimeter around the system, ensuring that no counterattack could threaten the survivors. Ambassador stood on the observation deck of the TSS Indomitable. She had been invited aboard by Admiral Vance for a ceremony marking the official end of military operations. Outside the reinforced windows, she could see the fleet spread across the darkness of space. Human warships, cruisers, destroyers, vessels from a dozen different species working together. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Ambassador, Admiral Vance said, approaching with 2 cups of a hot beverage. Would you like some coffee? It's a human drink, bitter but energizing. Accepted the cup carefully. Her 4-fingered hands were not designed for human containers, but she managed to hold it without spilling. She took a small sip and made a face at the strong taste. It is interesting, she said diplomatically. Vance laughed. That's the polite way of saying you don't like it. Don't worry, most non-humans feel the same way. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the fleet. Admiral said finally, I have a question I have been wanting to ask since this began. Please. Why did you come, truly? Not the official reason, not the diplomatic answer, the real reason. Vance was quiet for a long moment. She sipped her coffee and stared out at the stars. 200 years ago, she began slowly, humanity left Earth and reached the stars. We were excited. We thought we would find friends out here, allies, fellow travelers on the journey of civilization. She shook her head. Instead, we found fear. Every species we met looked at us with terror in their eyes. They saw our history, all our wars, all our violence, all the terrible things we had done to each other, and they decided we were monsters, creatures too dangerous to be trusted. We have all heard the stories, admitted. Your planet is said to be a nightmare, a world where everything is trying to kill you. It is. Earth is dangerous, and humans are dangerous too. We evolved to be predators, to fight and survive in conditions that would kill almost any other intelligent species. Vance turned to face the ambassador. But that doesn't make us evil, it just makes us equipped. The same instincts that helped us survive on Earth, the aggression, the stubbornness, the refusal to give up, they also give us the ability to protect others. Protect others. Think about it. Humans are social creatures. We survive by forming groups, by watching out for each other. On Earth, we had to protect our families from predators, from weather, from everything the planet threw at us. We developed powerful instincts for protection. When someone in our group was threatened, we fought. When someone was hurt, we helped. When someone called for aid, we answered. Consider this, and those instincts extend to non-humans. Eventually, yes, at first we only protected our own families, then our villages, then our nations, then our entire species. Vance smiled slightly. The circle keeps expanding. First we protected humans on Earth, then humans across the solar system, then humans across the galaxy, and now we're learning to protect everyone. You make it sound simple. It is simple. That's what everyone else in the galaxy doesn't understand. They think we calculate costs and benefits, weigh risks against rewards, make rational decisions about who deserves protection and who doesn't. Vance shook her head. We don't. We can't. When we see someone suffering, when we hear someone calling for help, something inside us responds. We have to act. It's not a choice, it's who we are. Thought about this for a long moment. She remembered her own people's reaction to the human intervention. The shock, the disbelief, the inability to understand why anyone would fight so hard for strangers. The galaxy has always feared you, she said quietly. I know. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps we were looking at the wrong traits. Turned to face the Admiral. We saw the violence and the aggression. We saw the death world instincts. We did not see the protection instinct, the guardian instinct. Guard dogs, Vance said. Pardon. It's an old Earth expression. A guard dog is an animal bred and trained to protect its family and home. It's fierce and dangerous to anyone who threatens what it loves. But to the people it protects, it's loyal and gentle and would die rather than let them come to harm. Vance smiled. That's what humans are, Ambassador. We're the galaxy's guard dogs, and someone just threatened our flock. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She had spent her entire career in diplomacy, navigating the complex relationships between species, managing treaties and agreements and political compromises. She had never encountered anything like this, a species that would fight and die simply because someone had asked for help. Thank you, she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for coming. Thank you for saving my people. You don't have to thank us, Vance replied gently. You asked, we answered, that's how it works. The ceremony took place later that day in the Indomitable's main hangar bay. Representatives from every species present in the system gathered to mark the official end of military operations and the beginning of the recovery effort. Admiral Vance stood at a podium, addressing the assembled crowd. Behind her, holographic displays showed images of the battle, the destruction, and the ongoing reconstruction. 23 days ago, she began, the Terran Alliance received a distress call from the government. They were under attack. Their allies had abandoned them. Their people were dying, and they asked for help. She paused, looking out at the diverse faces before her. We answered that call, not because we had a treaty with not because we expected anything in return, but because someone was suffering and we had the power to stop it. In the battle that followed, 112 human ships were destroyed. 4,643 human soldiers, sailors, and volunteers gave their lives. Many more were wounded. Some will never fully recover. Felt a weight settle on her heart. So many had died for her people. So many families had lost loved ones, would never see their children or parents or siblings again. All because she had sent a message into the darkness. I know what some of you are thinking, Vance continued. You're wondering if it was worth it. You're running the calculations in your heads, weighing the lives lost against the lives saved, trying to determine if the numbers justify the sacrifice. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried through the entire hangar. Stop calculating, stop weighing, stop measuring lives like they're cargo to be balanced on a scale. Her voice rose again, strong and firm. 8 billion people are alive today because we answered a distress call. 8 billion people who would have been enslaved or killed if we had done the math and decided the risk was too high. She gestured at the assembled representatives. Look around you. 3 weeks ago, most of you refused to help you had good reasons, treaties, logistics, fear. You calculated the costs and decided they were too high. She paused. And then you watched humans die for strangers and you felt ashamed, and you came anyway. Several representatives lowered their eyes. The admiral who had first contacted Vance looked particularly uncomfortable. "I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty," Vance said, her voice softening. "I'm saying it because it proves something important. Deep down, every species in this galaxy knows what's right. You know that innocent people shouldn't be abandoned. You know that the strong should protect the weak. You know that 'it's not our problem' is never an acceptable answer when lives are at stake." She straightened, her voice ringing with conviction. "Humanity has spent 200 years being called monsters, creatures too violent and dangerous to be trusted. And maybe some of that is true. We are dangerous. We are violent. We carry the survival instincts of a death world in our blood. But those same instincts drive us to protect, to defend, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We don't do it because it's smart or strategic or profitable. We do it because we cannot do otherwise. Today, I want to send a message to every species in this galaxy. Not a threat, not a warning, a promise." Vance looked directly into the recording devices that were broadcasting her words across known space. "If you are attacked, if your people are threatened, if you need help and everyone else has turned away, call us. We will come. We will fight. We will not stop until you are safe." This is not a political position. It is not contingent on treaties or agreements or payment. It is simply who we are. Humanity answers distress calls. We always have. We always will. And to anyone who would prey on the weak, who would attack the defenseless, who would exploit those who cannot defend themselves, know this: you are not alone anymore. They are watching, and we protect our own. She stepped back from the podium. For a moment there was silence. Then the applause began. It started with the human personnel and spread quickly to the other species. Within seconds, the entire hangar was filled with the sound of clapping, stomping, clicking, and every other form of approval the various species could produce. Found herself cheering along with everyone else, tears streaming freely down her face. The broadcast of Admiral Vance's speech spread across the galaxy within hours. It was translated into hundreds of languages and shared on every network. Within days, it had been seen by trillions of beings on thousands of worlds. The reactions were mixed. Some species expressed relief. The idea of a powerful protector, willing to intervene against aggression, was comforting to those who had always lived in fear of their neighbors. Others were suspicious. They saw the speech as a declaration of human dominance, a warning that humanity intended to impose its values on the rest of the galaxy. But most beings, watching the footage of humans fighting and dying for strangers, felt something deeper, something harder to define. Hope perhaps, or shame, or a mixture of both. On the OK, the surviving overlords gathered to discuss the disaster. Their fleet was shattered. Their reputation was ruined. And the galaxy now knew that attacking innocents would bring human warships to their doorstep. "We must rebuild," one overlord argued. "We must prepare for revenge." "Revenge against what?" another replied bitterly. "They have 8,000 warships. We had 800. Even if we rebuild, even if we spend a century preparing, we cannot match their strength." "Then what do we do?" The eldest overlord, a veteran who had survived a dozen wars, spoke slowly. "We change. We adapt. The old ways, conquest, domination, enslavement, these are no longer viable. The humans have made that clear." "You suggest we become peaceful," the first overlord sneered. "We are okay. We are warriors." "I suggest we become smart." The elder fixed his younger colleague with a cold stare. "The humans did not destroy us when they could have. They offered mercy to our survivors. They are fierce in battle but not cruel in victory. Perhaps there is something to be learned from that." The debate would continue for years. Some OK would call for revenge, for preparation, for eventual war against humanity. Others would argue for reform, for adapting to a galaxy where might no longer made right. But all of them would remember the lesson of the system. They were watching, and they protected their own. 6 months after the battle, Ambassador returned to the observation deck of her reconstructed office building. The city around her was still being rebuilt. Cranes and construction equipment filled the skyline, but the sounds of building had replaced the sounds of destruction. Her people would survive, her civilization would recover, and it was all because of a message she had sent into the darkness. She was reading reports when her assistant entered. "Ambassador, there's someone here to see you." "Who?" "Lieutenant Commander. He says he's shipping out and wanted to say goodbye." Felt a smile spread across her face. "Send him in." Entered the office, looking much better than the last time she had seen him. His wounds had healed, and his uniform was clean and pressed. But he still had the same calm, steady presence that had impressed her during the worst of the crisis. "Commander," she said warmly, "I hear you're leaving us." "The Resilient has been fully repaired. We're being reassigned to patrol duty in the outer territories," he smiled. "Though I have to admit I'll miss this place." "Will you come back?" "If you need us." He said it simply, as if it was obvious. "We'll always come back if you need us." Stood and walked to the window. Outside, a human construction team was working alongside engineers to rebuild a school. The children who would attend it would grow up in a world transformed by what had happened here. "I have thought often about what Admiral Vance said," told him. "About humans being guard dogs, about protection being in your nature. It's true, we can't help it. I believe that now." She turned to face him. "But I also believe it is more than instinct. It is a choice. Every one of your people who came here, who fought and died for strangers, made a choice. They chose to be protectors instead of conquerors. They chose to help instead of ignore." Nodded slowly. "I guess that's right. We have the instincts, but we still choose how to use them. Humanity has done terrible things throughout its history. We've used our violence against each other, against innocent people, against anyone who got in our way. Being a doesn't automatically make you good. What does then? Deciding to be, every day, every choice, every moment where you could turn away but don't." He met her eyes. "That's all any of us can do. Decide to be better than our instincts. Decide to protect instead of harm." Felt the truth of his words settle into her heart. "Thank you, Commander, for everything." "Thank you, Ambassador, for asking for help," he smiled. "Most species never do. They're too proud or too scared or too convinced that no one will answer. You took a chance." "I was desperate." "You were brave, there's a difference." He saluted in the human fashion, turned and walked out of her office. Watched him go, then turned back to the window. The galaxy had changed. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not completely, but the change had begun. Species that had never cooperated were now working together. Governments that had never lifted a finger to help others were now building fleets and training crews. The Galactic Council, once a useless talking shop, was debating actual defensive agreements. And at the center of it all were the humans, the monsters who had turned out to be guardians. Did not know what the future would hold. She did not know if peace would last, if the galaxy would truly learn from what had happened here, if humanity's protection would extend to all who needed it. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If darkness ever came again, if her people were ever threatened, she would not hesitate to send another message into the void. Because they were watching. And they answered distress calls. Always.